Okay, so I'm back. We're kind of on part two right now. We were talking about wanting to make the clay wider instead of longer. So we've turned it around and remembering that the guides have to not be touching the clay. However, those guides have to be close enough that this hits them. That is the key. This needs to hit the clay. Or what's going to happen is you're going to start rolling the clay without the guide and it's going to get way too thin and it won't be a piece of clay that you can use anymore. Okay, so now I'm going to stand up again and I'm going to use my palms and I'm going to keep going until I feel like I'm hitting the guides. Okay, so that feels pretty much like I've met the guides, which means that my clay is now this thick, which is exactly where I want it to be because it's a great thickness for slab work. I'm no longer needing the guides anymore. And now I'm going to talk to you about joining clay. Right now, I'm not doing any particular project. So we're just going to pretend that I'm going to do a face. And so I'm going to, cut a circle. And I'm going to pull the pieces that I don't want, and I'm going to put them off to the side. Now, here's the part where you're going to want to pick those things up and squish them up. But please don't. Let those stay put, okay? All right, maybe I want to put a nose on. So I'm going to, let's just pretend that's going to be my nose. Isn't that great? Okay, so I want to join that. Well, first of all, it's important to know that this does not have to be that thick. Only this has to be thick. So if you would like to go off to the side and roll it down a little bit, you can definitely make it thinner using your cutting tool. And by the way, you want to hold your cutting tool straight up. If you hold it crooked, you're going to get an edge that's crooked and sharp. So make sure you hold the cutting tool straight up. Okay, once again, pretend I'm going to add that to the clay. Now, a lot of you might think, why? It's staying. Well, it's only staying because it's wet. So once this is dry, that's just going to fall off. So we're going to make it stay forever. And to do that, we're going to do something kind of odd. This will seem odd to you. I'm going to take this little tool and I'm going to poke holes that are as deep as the tool. I wonder if I could get closer. So just as deep as those little marks right there. It's not very deep. And I'm going to put, again, not very deep, little holes in there. And then you all know what would happen if I did that. Well, those are air holes. And those are probably just going to explode and pop the nose right off. But if we add water to those holes can have water, not air, but water. And to get water, this is a little bit of a hard thing for some of my kids, is you're going to squeeze into the water sponge and you're going to kind of pick it up in your fingers. So they're dripping now. So it's like my fingers are a scoop. And I'm going to pick up, and then there's a nice amount of water right there. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's a good amount of water. And then I'm just going to gently tap that in there. Be super careful that you do not rub the top of your holes because you might accidentally be, remember, sealing the air. So let's make sure that there is water in those holes, and the holes are actually still there. So it's a light touch. The piece of clay that I'm going to join to it, I'm going to do the same thing. I can get a little closer here for you. And then I'm going to drop water. Now notice I'm just tapping water in there. And if you can't get a lot of water on your fingers, see if you can get somebody to help you figure out a way to do that. Okay, then I'm going to put them together. And you're wondering what those holes are doing? Well, what happens is we've got holes on both sections of the clay, and the water will slowly suck in clay from the other side, creating these little tubes of clay. So pretty soon those holes are filled with clay and the clay is now joined. Okay, one thing we want to do is I always call it rock it and pat it. So I kind of rock it and pat it just a little bit. So now it's on there. And if you don't want to see, you know, some air underneath here, which doesn't look very good, don't be afraid to get in there and apply a little bit of pressure and kind of seal it, okay? The other thing is once clay is on, don't assume that it's the way you want it to be. You have now control of that clay. This is where you can start shaping and forming. So for instance, what if I did that and I created a nostril? What if I did that and I pressed clay all the way back and made the nose look a little bit more authentic? So you have some control of the clay once it's on there. You can press and things like that. And what you're doing is you're shaping without putting holes in the clay. Okay, so I've taught you to join. Remember that this is all the clay that you'll use to create other things. I think I've pretty much covered everything with your tools and absolutely what not to do with clay. Oh, one final thing. When you're all done with your slab work, you're going to pick it up and you can gently turn it over in your other hand and then take your fingernail, and it doesn't matter whether you have a big fingernail or not, and just lightly put your initials in it. Your teacher might want you to put the period on there as well, but as long as you have your initials, you should be able to identify this piece of clay later. So remember, do not make your initials too deep, because here is what's going to happen if kids think they need to make the initials nice and deep. My clay is now breaking because I cut too deep into it from the back. So remember, just your fingernails, nice and light. It'll show. And then this never goes back onto your shelf because clay's, you don't want it to stick somewhere. We have special carts where these dry, and again, they dry for a week before we fire them. So it's about a week and a half to 2 weeks before you'll see it again. Okay? All right. See you later.